Cern Basher just called me a knucklehead, and I'm sure he's right. He actually called himself a knucklehead too, so there you go. It's fair. But we're going to be talking about anything but knuckleheads today. We're going to be talking about what might have been, I, Cern. I don't know if you'd characterize it this way. Maybe the most important 3 hours that I've spent in the last 6 months was listening to Elon with Peter Diamandis and the Moonshot show the other night, especially coming on the heels of the previous day when we had the show with yeah,
Jensen.
Jensen Wang, who crashed the Tesla stock, followed by this other show which should have put everybody at ease and caused the stock to completely recover, but not so much. So I'm curious, Cern, do you how much would you agree with the idea that right now we're seeing the stock actually just trickle down a little bit per each day because we're not getting what we were promised at the end of the year with robotaxi? That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, that seems to be concerning for a lot of people. I would say that, the calendar is an artificial construct created by humans. Of course, everything else that we do is as well. But, if it takes a few more days, a few more weeks, a few more months, in the whole scheme of things, it does not matter.
Right.
So Tesla is going to do what they need to do. They're going to take the time they need to take. They're going to make sure it's safe and they're comfortable with the safety profile of what they're offering. And you know what? If Elon says at the end of the year and it ends up being in January or March, so be it.
Yeah, I guess I was just talking about from the standpoint of buyers and sellers on the market.
Oh,
People who, expected it and then their expectations weren't met. There's a book that I recommended for years, but it never sold very much. It was called Expectations Ruin Relationships.
hmm.
And I thought it was a great title, and the book actually did a great job of talking about how expectations ruin relationships. And I think right now we had expectations. Those expectations weren't met, and so it hurts the relationship of people who might have less of a less of a long-term investment uh, in mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's two approaches to investing, right? One is to have your own expectations and invest accordingly.
Mhm.
The other approach is to not have any expectations, but look at the expectations of others
Right,
and judge as to whether or not those are likely or not, and then
right.
invest accordingly. And that's really the two ways of quote unquote investing. The second way is a bit more of a trading mentality, in my view.
Hmm, hmm,
And of course, there's plenty of people that do that, and Wall Street is kind of built for that.
hmm.
Um, it's just a matter of how you're wired and how you want to approach things.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, my show and your participation in it is all based on the idea that information. If you want to be a retail investor and not just put your money into the three Qs or into, you know, some kind of mutual fund, if you're going to be a retail investor, then understanding the companies that you're investing in is still today has amazing arbitrage capabilities.
I think so, given that most of the world seems to be very short-term focused and trading focused. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I understand that you're going to get into the Diamandis thing among other things, so I will let you go. Do your thing.
Sure. Well, we're going to start with where we often start, and that's with the Cybertruck. Although, if you look at this one, it's kind of dinged up. And what do you think happened to the Cybertruck, Randy? Did he back into a supercharger?
I hope not.
You
Um,
actually have to park pretty close to some of the superchargers for the
yeah,
the short cables to reach.
I've heard this. I don't know if it was from you or somebody else, but I've heard that that's true.
Yep.
Stern, I would be guessing all day long. I'm afraid you're going to just have to help me out here.
Yeah, and this is unfortunate because this is a beast. Um, but it was rear-ended by a car.
Oh, gee.
And you'd almost never know it by the previous photo. But look at the car. It's total. And the Cybertruck has a mere scratch, Randy.
Oh my goodness.
Here's another fire department, I guess, pulling the two cars away from each other. And the Cybertruck, the bumper needs to be replaced.
Yeah, yeah.
Be interesting to see what other damage there is. But apparently, this car hit. according to this, I don't know if it's true or not, but a 50-mile-per-hour rear end. That seems a little high for this, but who knows? Maybe. Obviously, a lot of damage to the car,
Yes.
and hopefully everybody's okay. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
impressive. I want to put my family in a Cybertruck. I think it's the safest vehicle on the road.
I think you're probably right. Now, I've said this before on my show. In fact, I think I even said it a few days ago. I had a friend for many years who was a great philosopher, very, very smart guy. And he used to say, "Hey, I can give you a safe car. It's called a tank."
Yeah.
And so the Cybertruck, I think, is the closest thing to a tank, on the road today. But with the addition, or added benefits of being constructed specifically to take impact.
Yeah, it's a tank that drives like a sports car, Randy.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So, it's both. It's a sports car and a tank. There's not
Yes,
very many vehicles like that.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So we were talking at the outset about this interview that Elon did. I think it was on December 22nd,
Yes, I think so.
with Peter and Dave. Overall, I would say this was really good. I did find it frustrating to listen to because of the interruptions.
Oh,
And that was a common, I think, a refrain or criticism of this. But overall, it was very good. I think it could have been a lot better if they just would have let Elon finish his thoughts.
so Peter does this to everybody. He wasn't picking on Elon. This is
Yeah.
this would be a problem with pretty much all of the shows. He's already ahead in the conversation. He's already thinking about what he wants to do next, and he gets impatient. He does it all the time. I listen pretty much to everything he puts on at this point, but yeah, it's a problem.
He was desperate to try to keep them on track, even if it
Yes,
meant taking
yes,
them off track to put them on
right,
track.
right, yes.
At one point, they were talking about longevity, and Peter, I think, indicated he wants to live to 130 or something like that. So I use Grok to create the baby versions of them, because Elon, I think, was joking that they'd be there so long that they would eventually, get younger.
Right.
Now, Grok, you can see, still have Elon's a full baby, but if you look at Dave there on the left, it still had adult legs on him.
Oh, I see. Yes, right.
So the transformation wasn't complete for him. And same thing with Peter. It looks like he's got baby legs, but also an adult leg there too.
Right.
So that was good.
Yes, I think there's an entire book about this, I think, with regressing back into your farmer self. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Movie and everything. Yeah.
And Elon was talking about a supersonic tsunami hitting us with AI. And this is an image actually from Gemini. Um, and so, with tsunamis, everything looks normal until the wave hits.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. And that's sort of what they're talking. And that's a common refrain, I think, from Peter's Moonshots podcast,
Yeah.
what we're hearing from those guys. The rate of change is shocking to them. And Elon said the same thing on this interview.
Yeah. I was actually I said it in the book. Um, Others might have said it in the book as well on AI, but I also was having a conversation with my son earlier this morning that it's not going to come all at once, though, like a tsunami, I don't think. Just like the internet thing didn't come all at once. There are still small companies out there that don't have websites. We're talking
Yeah.
2025, 30 years after they don't have a website. So I think we'll see a lot of companies 10 years from now that'll look a lot like they do today, and will not have, and they'll still be successful, or at least successful enough. And this is just the way it is. People have resistance to change. They're old and they're like, I don't need it anymore, whatever. But for a million reasons, they just don't change as fast.
This one could be a little different. I agree, it's not going to be overnight. And it's funny when Elon is asked questions about anything longer than 5 years, he often says, well, 5 years is a long time.
Yeah, right.
He doesn't like to think too far out either.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Um, I asked, I think this was ChatGPT or perhaps Gemini, to summarize the video for me.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not going to go through all this here. I
Right.
would encourage people to listen to it against almost 3 hours. It's a long, long interview. But there were certainly lots of things, like, for example, this timeline to AGI that Elon predicts that we'll reach it this year,
Right,
and that we are living through the singularity now.
right.
Um, so that's interesting. Here we are at 2026.
Yes.
One of the things he said, I think this third point, this idea of intelligence density, he says he expects 10 to 100x improvement in performance shortly. Uh, and that gives hope potentially for things like hardware 3 running FSD, unsupervised FSD.
Hmm.
And there was a good discussion around that. Um, and then, of course, the conversation too about making sure AI is safe.
Right.
And he's talked about this before in terms of being maximally truth-seeking is an important feature. But he also said that a couple other things I think he mentioned. One was he wants AI to be curious.
Yep.
And I forget the third one, Randy. Do you recall?
I think he said it here, and he commonly talks about the idea that he believes that the AI should be seeking beauty or be interested in beauty.
That
And,
was it.
and if it does those three things
Yeah.
together, then it will care about sentient beings. Because and the curiosity thing I think is his most fun point. In fact, I actually had thought about for years doing a book on curiosity because I don't think psychologists, sociologists, etc., have paid enough attention to the
Mm,
power of curiosity. But what his point was here is that we are the most curious about the things that are the most interesting.
yeah.
We're not that curious about watching concrete dry. Okay, but I can remember as a child watching trapdoor spiders for hours. Seriously, watching I mean,
Yeah.
literally sitting there and waiting for that trapdoor, for a fly to land, for the trapdoor spider to come out and do what it did. So we're curious about the things that are the most interesting, and that he believes could translate into the AI to where humans will be the most interesting thing. Therefore, they'll want to keep the humans, as a species. They'll want to keep us around because that's what they would want to do.
There were a number of times I thought in the interview where Elon sort of says, "Well, I just choose to be optimistic."
Yes, right. Yes,
Right, given the uncertainty about how this will all play out. Um, in talking about robotics and Optimus, he predicted within 3 years, Optimus would be a better surgeon than most, well, than the best human surgeons,
right.
which is interesting. And they talked about LASIK, right? Even the best, doctor holding a laser, you wouldn't want to trust with LASIK surgery. And he's saying really the same thing with robots. So that's interesting. That would be a massive change to healthcare, and if it's within 3 years, that's a very quick period of time.
Well, and I thought he didn't go far enough here. Again, you've got 3 hours already, but I thought, you could say, for instance, that there's all kinds of robotic surgery taking place today. It was at least 10, 15 years ago that they first started talking about doing
Yeah,
robotic surgery in the field, doing heart
intuitive surgical.
surgery, where the doctor would be in New York City managing the robot, through the internet.
That's right.
Yeah, this is not a shock to me at all, other than the fact that maybe it becomes so pervasive in terms of the amount of surgery that's done by robotics.
Yeah, the difference here is I guess it's a humanoid robot that also
Right.
does everything else.
Right.
The robot that does the plumbing is also the best
Right.
surgeon in the world.
Plumbing.
Probably not too many plumbers that are the best surgeons in the world today. I'm sure there's one out there that's an amazing at both. Um, Anyway, so we'll get into this a little bit more, but this, he envisions a future with billions of humanoid robots. We've discussed this before over the last couple of years, and they'll be handling most physical labor. And he talks about, robots take over blue collar work and AI takes over white collar tasks. The cost of labor effectively becomes the cost of the hardware, the capex plus the electrical cost. So driving down the cost of labor to next to nothing.
Right.
Um, Talking about energy infrastructure, solar, we're going to need a ton of energy. We've talked about orbital data centers before. Um, and then conversation about space exploration. Um, driving down the cost of launch
Hmm.
to 1 million for over 100 tons of payload. And that will open up all kinds of space-based industries, making it viable. Having permanent moon base
Hmm.
and launching satellites from the moon becomes very easy. You just shoot them off the moon. You don't have to launch it.
Right.
Um, and then on this topic of universal high income, which is one that Peter sort of tried to get more out of him, but he kept getting, Dave kept kind of directing the conversation elsewhere. They never really closed on this, in my opinion, but it was quite a bit that was said. Elon feels that everybody will have effectively universal high income. And basically, he said the government should just print money. Forget about the debt, forget about worrying about that. Through this transition, government's just going to have to give people money.
Yeah. I wish that Elon would take a minute. Sometimes he takes a minute, like when he was building Colossus, he took a minute and he figured out how to get Colossus to be wired all as one computer, which nobody had ever done before for over 33,000 chips. And I wish he would take a minute on this whole issue because I've taken hours, and I think Elon in a minute or 5 minutes could do better than I do in hours. Thinking about the ramifications both ways. I've read a bunch of economists talking about all this, and even smart people other than economists. Um, there's a lot to take in here in
Yeah.
terms of the way that people will respond to some kind of universal high income or basic income. There's a lot to be thought of in terms of what that does to an economy. And I'm starting to hear Peter and Elon talk a little bit more practically about what the way that I describe it most often is the Taylor Swift effect. That will still be a Taylor Swift concert ticket will still be in scarcity. And
Right.
there's a lot more things like that that will still be scarce and that people will fight over economically or bid up the price of. And so I think there's a missing piece to both what Peter talks about and what Elon talks about in terms of kind of how the dynamics are going to play out.
Yeah, it's interesting because even in a world of what Elon now calls amazing abundance,
Mhm.
there will be things that are scarce, and those things will probably have great value,
Right.
right? Now, Elon in this interview and also elsewhere has talked about the need to not save money for retirement, right? And that's a little bit, I don't know, I wouldn't use the word irresponsible, but a little bit out there at this point. But I think where Elon's coming from is that for basic human needs,
Mhm.
that may be true. You won't need to really worry about saving money for food and shelter because it'll just be so cheap.
Right.
I can see a pathway for that.
Right.
But life is more than just, food, clothing, and shelter, right? And so if you want more than that, if you want more than just survival, although Elon's saying again, it's universal high income, we're all going to live like kings. We can have all the goods and services we want. Right. And we'll discuss this a little bit deeper today. I've done some of my own thinking on this,
Okay.
begun to try to fill hopefully some of the space that Elon's leaving here. Again, today we're just going to scratch the surface on this. But before we do that, he's talking about education, the conventional college path becoming obsolete for learning,
Hmm.
and he sees it more as just a social experience.
Hmm.
Future education will be personalized and AI driven. We've talked about that. It's in the book.
Hmm.
And then optimism is a strategy. He chooses to monetize hope, arguing being an optimist and wrong is better for one's quality of life than being a pessimist and right.
Right. No, that's a great, he has so many great sayings. He probably has, you know, more quotable quotes than anybody in the last decade. And that one should be like pasted up on every school classroom wall right now.
Yeah, here's another one that's just going to roll off the tongue. Recursive, multiplicable,
Right.
triple exponential.
Right.
It kind of sounds like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It's kind of
I
his
know.
version of that.
I know.
This really should be just one word.
Yeah.
Um, right. And so he says here's the thing to understand about humanoid robots in terms of the rate of improvement. You have three exponentials multiplied by each other. You have an exponential increase in the AI software capability, the brain, exponential increase in the AI chip capability, the size of the brain, and exponential increase in the electromechanical dexterity, the robot's ability to manipulate things.
Right.
So the usefulness of the humanoid robot is those three things multiplied by each other. And then you have the recursive effect of Optimus building Optimus.
Right.
And I think he talked about how the 8 million square foot factory, the building would be complete by, within a year.
Yeah. Yeah. And this 8 million square foot building, I've talked about this already a couple of times, but for those of you who didn't hear it, an 8 million square foot building can build a lot more than a million Optimus a year, or Optimi.
Yeah.
My analysis a year ago, maybe more than a year ago, because I have built a couple of factories, my analysis of the space that would be required to build a million robots was under 100,000 square feet. So when you're talking about 8 million, you're talking about 80 times that. So we're talking about the ability maybe within this building to build 100 million robots.
Got to think big.
Yeah.
Do you know offhand what the square footage is of Giga Texas as it stands now?
I don't remember. It's so huge. It's one of those numbers that's so
Yeah.
big you can't wrap your arms around it, but it's a mile long, right? Um,
Yeah.
and very wide and tall, 5 stories or something. There are a few. I did a research on this a while back. There are a few hotels that have more usable square foot, like Circus in Vegas, and a couple of others that have more usable square foot under one roof. But it's a rare thing. It's only a few.
Let's see here. Just
Sure.
since we've asked it, we better close the loop. Over 10 million square feet for Giga Texas.
So there you go. And you're talking about 8 million just for Optimus. I mean, you're
Yeah, it's a
talking
big building.
massive, massive capability here.
Yep. Okay, so that's good. Okay, so let's get into the economics of all this, or at least begin to scratch the surface.
Sure, sure.
Let's take a step back. Let's look at GDP.
Okay.
Okay, so GDP, and by the way, these are some illustrations that I had AI create for me
Wow.
using Gemini in this case. Gemini is pretty good at creating illustrations.
Yeah.
Okay, so the problem with GDP accounting is that it measures economic activity, not economic benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so things that like you rebuild after a tornado or a hurricane
Right.
counts as GDP, but you're just rebuilding what you had.
Sure.
So if we go around and blow stuff up and then
Sure.
rebuild it, that's adding to GDP.
Sure.
That doesn't seem very smart, right? You have to do it after a storm.
Sure. Actually,
Accidents,
that has a good. So if you want to get technical, it has a good. I mean, whether you're repairing something that has worn out or
yeah,
whether you're replacing it after a storm, you are doing a good when you're doing that.
partly a good, but part of it is just replacing what
Right.
was there that's
Yeah.
existing that maybe didn't need replacing. The bridge got,
Right.
destroyed. It was a perfectly good bridge until the waves took it away.
Right.
Maybe you build the bridge better next time,
Right.
and hopefully they do. It doesn't always happen. Anyway, the point here is that not all things are really equal in GDP.
Right.
We're measuring activity. Mitigating pollution adds to GDP, but in reality, why not stop polluting in the first place? Right? So GDP isn't the end all be all of economic success,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? If we focus on benefits, building new productive capacity, like a new robot factory, improving quality of life for people, like these are things that would be more tangible, better, but that's not really reflected in GDP.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you might call some of those expenses unproductive. Economists refer to them as defensive expenditures, regrettable expenditures, or remedial expenditures.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like the regrettable one,
Yeah. Right.
right? You have a car accident,
Yeah.
regrettable. You got to,
Right.
fix the car. You got to pay the medical bills. You got to pay the lawyers to sue the guy that hit you, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those are all regrettable expenditures.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because, well, here's some examples, right? So how much of GDP is regrettable expenditures?
Hmm.
So if we look at some categories, disaster recovery and repairs, it's estimated that about 1 to 3% of GDP, depending on the year and depending on the disaster and that kind of stuff, is spent on this kind of thing, right? after wildfires and storms and floods and repairing infrastructure and all that stuff.
Right.
Okay, so that's regrettable. Unfortunately, that happens. We know it happens. You have to kind of budget for that, but that's not really advancing our society too much, unless you're building back something that's more resilient,
Right. Right.
right? Or replacing power lines and putting them with, fiber or something underground or something that's more resilient to destruction.
Hmm.
Healthcare. Apparently, about call it 15 to 20% of GDP and sorry of healthcare spending
Hmm.
would be considered to be preventable.
Hmm.
So whether that's, obesity related disease, people just not, taking care of themselves, or smoking, alcohol, drug abuse,
Sure.
sedentary lifestyle illnesses, all things that in theory are preventable.
Hmm.
Okay, so we spend a lot of our healthcare money on those things, and that's estimated to be between 4 and 7% of total GDP.
Okay.
Okay. There's also another category in here, by the way, of diseases that AI may solve
Hmm.
and eliminate this slice of the pie entirely. Like if we solved cancer, for example, you would probably reduce healthcare spending by a massive amount.
Sure.
Okay. So in that case, right now it's not preventable, but it could be.
Right.
So it would fall into that regrettable expenditures category at that point.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's one of the great promises of AI, is that it's going to help us eradicate many diseases.
Right. Now, we've already been doing that, of course, for at least 150 years. We've been
Yep.
really, really successful at preventing a lot of kinds of diseases. I mean, infant mortality alone and pregnant woman mortality during childbirth
Yep.
I mean, those things have been almost reduced out of existence. So we already know we can already kind of use historical information to kind of
Mhm.
predict what impact this will have on future GDP.
And AI may accelerate it if
Right.
overnight we solve all of cancers,
Right.
basically, or
Right.
maybe not overnight, but over a few years, basically,
Mhm.
which is overnight.
Mhm.
Um, and then we've got accidents and safety failures, right? Where it's car accidents, so you got medical costs, legal costs, repair costs, workplace injuries, right? If you've got robots, you eliminate that. And then just the administration of all this stuff, right? Insurance and all the stuff, all the stuff that has to go on in the background to make all that work. That's estimated to be, again, another 2 to 3% of GDP.
And that may be understated because then you got the lawyers that are involved. And
Hmm.
when you get the lawyers involved, you don't just have the legal fees or the legal expense of the litigation, et cetera, but you also have the regulation that follows and the diminished ability of people to use equipment maybe the way they'd like to use the equipment. So my favorite example over the years is always diving boards in home swimming pools.
Mm.
So that was my favorite thing to do in a swimming pool was dive. And now many home swimming pools or even community pools don't have diving boards anymore because of lawyers. Uh,
Yep.
so, can you use AI to figure out a way to make a diving board in a swimming pool that reduces the chance of injury to almost nothing, and thereby eliminates that? Anyway, that's just an example that I've always been fascinated by.
Robot lifeguards, I suppose, is the answer. Yeah. Yep. So there's that. And then we've got crime, incarceration, and security costs, estimated to be between 1 and 2% of GDP, right? The cost of incarcerating people in the court system, the cost of private security, loss prevention for, companies, and all these things. It says here, these costs exist because something went wrong, not because value was created,
Right.
right? And I'm not sure that AI necessarily is going to solve all this, but this is a category of GDP that would be regrettable.
Hmm. Hmm.
Wish we didn't have to pay it.
Hmm.
Pollution cleanup and environmental damage, right? The economic impact of that is estimated to be between 1 and 3% of GDP.
Hmm.
Okay. And then we've got financial friction and inefficiency. So excessive intermediation, where you've got banks and brokers and middlemen and so on, all collecting their fees, compliance costs, right? Some of the challenges that we have in meeting the rules, and maybe some of the rules aren't even necessary in the first place, but you've got
Right.
compliance costs to deal with that. Adversarial legal overhead, and then rent-seeking behavior. So that's estimated to between 2 to 5% of GDP,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? and AI may allow us to be more efficient in all these areas.
Definitely.
So what we have then is a big chunk of GDP, and it's estimated between 20 to 40%. Again, pretty wishy-washy in terms of the
Right.
numbers, but let's call it a third of GDP that is regrettable.
Hmm.
Okay. It's, kind of unproductive, although it's productive in the sense that it's helping us get back to where we were.
Right.
Right? If somebody has an accident, the value of that doctor is very important,
Yeah.
but regrettable in the sense that if we could avoid the accident in the first place, that would be better.
Hmm.
So again, GDP measures how busy we are, not how well we are. So the idea for true progress is to, spend money on things that are quote unquote good.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. Okay. So let's think about then how AI could impact us. One of the things that I think Elon talked about in the interview, um, and I need to listen to this part again, but I think I heard him say that we actually could have a period of time where GDP suffers because of AI.
Hmm.
Because if AI makes our world more efficient,
Hmm.
reduces waste, uh, if we solve, just pick an example, if we solve cancer, for example, that's a big chunk of GDP that goes away,
Yeah.
right? So this idea that GDP could stagnate or even fall even as our real welfare rises. So we need to be aware of this. We need to understand that GDP growth may not be the best measure of our economy. It never was,
Right. Right. Right.
but even more so now.
Mhm.
Okay.
So theoretically, though, we should see, in terms of that one, we should see a pickup in productive hours.
Yeah.
So if we don't have an accident, we don't go to the doctor and spend a week in a hospital bed, and we don't spend another 3 weeks recovering. If we don't get cancer, we don't spend. So there should be the number of productive hours of humans pick up. Plus, when you have these things, even if you're not in a hospital bed, you may be less productive because of the trauma, because of recovery, because you have an injury. Almost any of these cases, I mean, even if it's just a simple thing of having simple, even if it's something as horrible as having your house broken into, you may have trauma for a week over that makes you less productive.
Sure.
So we could see an improvement even in these cases.
You could, unless people decide to spend that extra time just on TikTok or watching
Yeah,
TV.
right. Yes.
So,
But then TikTok makes more money, right? So
well, I suppose so, but yeah. Um, right. So who knows? But I think your point's well made. Um, so what I did here was just kind of, again, this is a very simple look at this, but I think it's helpful to kind of go through this.
sure,
So let's explore this idea of AI could cause GDP to fall.
right.
Okay. So let's say we've got a $30 trillion economy, and 20 trillion of that, two-thirds of it, is made up of what we would call good welfare producing spending. Again, one man's good welfare
Right,
producing
right,
spending is another man's wasteful.
right.
I get that. But I think we can all agree that a healthy portion, and let's call it a third of the economy, is in what we would call regrettable expenditures that we just kind of went through.
Sure.
Okay. And I totally understand there's massive wiggle room between all these numbers.
Right.
Get it. Okay. So what happens then to GDP when AI dramatically reduces the regrettable expenditures?
Mhm.
Okay. Because AI isn't just a computer, AI is a method of coordination,
Mhm, mhm.
right? Automation, right? So could GDP go down? The answer is yes. But the major point is that we'd all be better off for it.
Mhm, mhm.
And let me show you why. Okay. Try to actually put some numbers to this.
Okay, of
All right. And classic Cern fashion, I got some charts for you, Randy.
course.
Right? Spreadsheet behind this. Okay. So in year zero, we're starting with a $30 trillion economy.
Uh-huh.
Okay. AI is starting to diffuse throughout the economy. We're adopting AI for more and more and more. And we're driving down the regrettable expenditures. We'll go from 10 trillion to call it 9.5, down to 9, down to 8.5, down to 7.25. Right? It's driving the wasteful spending down.
Mhm.
Okay. Now you can see also though that the good spending is going up.
Right.
But the combination of the two, GDP is going down.
Hmm. Hmm.
This could be one scenario, right?
Sure.
Now, here it is in terms of percentage changes. We're driving down the regrettable spending faster than we're driving up the good spending.
Hmm. Hmm.
Is that possible? Maybe. There's just some scenarios I think this could be the case. How likely is it? I don't think this is the baseline case,
Hmm.
but it's possible. So what I'm trying to show here is that you could have GDP going down, right, in blue, but if we take into effect that there would be deflation in the economy too on a lot of things, real GDP in green bars here
Hmm.
goes up.
Hmm.
So even though we have a quote unquote shrinking economy,
Right.
the real GDP per person actually is going up.
So CERN, assuming that I don't lose my job over it,
That would
so
be up to you.
no, so if I don't lose my job in your scenario,
Yes.
so we keep that static. Everybody that
Yeah.
has a job keeps their job. Your payroll stays the same, goes up, whatever, in a normal fashion. All that stays static. I'm going to compare this to what's happened since the 50s because I've studied it over and over again, is that the food bill in the 50s was 15% of my income. Now the food bill is maybe 7 or 8% of my income.
Mhm. Yeah.
So therefore, I have more money to spend on housing, and I claim that's what part of the reason why housing prices are so expensive, because I have more, everybody has more money to bid up the price of housing. Now, maybe they use that money to bid up the price of the Taylor Swift concert ticket, which I believe also happened. Okay.
Yes, it has. Yep.
And travel and just keep on going on the luxury
Yep.
goods. But in this case, if I don't have to spend it on an illness, if I don't have to spend it on replacing my car, even the $500 deductible, if I don't have to spend it on as much on insurance per month on my car, then all of a sudden I have more money to spend on something else. I have more money to spend on my house, my luxury goods, whatever.
Assuming there's not job losses, you're correct.
Right, right.
Right. Um, and so the case, I think, for declining GDP, I think is a hard one to make.
Hmm. Hmm.
But what I'm showing here is that even if it did happen,
Yeah.
that we'd still be better off for it.
Well, all the scenario is, so maybe we need a new measure. Maybe it'd be, remember, wasn't it Ronald Reagan that had the distress index or something he called it? It was the combination of inflation and I forget uh, I forget, there was three things, but maybe
Yeah.
we need a new index that measures quality of life, that everybody would kind of agree to, like days, illness days, per year, or, we do have, of course, we know in terms of when people die, we have that stat, but maybe there would be a combination of stats that we could come up with that would be quality of life stats.
I took a stab at that. I'm not going to present that today. I
Okay.
developed something I just simply called
Okay.
adjusted GDP.
Okay.
I wasn't really totally satisfied with it, but the concept I think stands.
All right. Okay.
And maybe we can talk about that next week. But for today, I just wanted to focus on GDP as it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's the percentage changes. So you can see that even though nominal GDP drops by 1 to 2% a year
Uh-huh.
in this scenario,
Right.
that real GDP goes up by actually a pretty healthy amount.
Right.
Okay. So that's one scenario. Now, I think it's more likely to see AI help grow GDP. The reason is because GDP is both labor times productivity,
Hmm.
and AI addresses both beautifully,
Hmm.
right? So AI is going to increase labor. Now, not humans, but robots,
Right.
right? And it's going to be a massive productivity driver. AI is going to do everything way more efficiently than any human can, right? For one, it can work 24 hours a day.
Right. Right.
No human can do that.
Right.
Maybe Elon, close to it. Not even him. Not even him. So in this scenario, we could actually see a decline in regrettable expenditures and a decline in good spending,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if that happened, again, this is kind of the worst case scenario, right? AI does everything better, and it just cuts GDP because it just drives down the price of everything.
Right.
You could see a decline in real GDP.
Right.
So let me just map that up for you. So again, same chart. We go from a $30 trillion economy down to what, 17 trillion. Okay. Here's the growth rates. You cut regrettable spending massively. It's you can see here the red part is tiny in the end. It's 1/10 of where we started.
Right.
So great job, AI. You got rid of cancer, you got rid of all this waste, but you also demonetized good parts of the economy too. Right? And you can see there that's shrinking. And here it is, though, in terms of nominal GDP goes from 30 trillion down to 17, but real GDP is still 27. So even in this scenario, it's not terrible.
Right. Right.
Right? It's almost flat. And again, I conjured up this example to show that you could have both nominal and real GDP go down in a certain scenario. Again, I think it's highly unlikely. Okay, and here's the growth rates on that. You got nominal GDP dropping and real GDP dropping, a couple percent a year.
Right.
Okay. Here's, though, the more likely scenario. And this is what Elon's been talking about. And this sounds crazy when you first think about it, but as I put these numbers in this scenario, it actually is looking to me more likely. Maybe not the triple digit, but double digit growth. So here's how. Okay. So the idea is that with enough automation and robotics, you can drive regrettable expenditures down and at the same time massively grow good spending.
Right.
Okay. And then with AI-driven deflation, if it's large enough, you could see an explosion in real GDP. And again, this is what Elon's been talking about. Okay. So this is the sustainable abundance. Now, it's actually called amazing abundance. When I wrote the post, I forgot that it's now changed. It's hard to keep up with it.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. And again, here's the post where he wrote this. This is from December 24th. Double-digit growth is coming within 12 to 18 months. If applied intelligence is proxy for economic growth, which it should be, triple-digit is possible in about 5 years. Okay? So here are the numbers. This is a scenario where you're driving down regrettable from 10 trillion down to 1. AI has gotten rid of all the waste and all the unnecessary spending that we have in that category. And at the same time, it's allowed us to produce a massive quantity of goods and services that we just couldn't do with human labor.
Right.
Right. And in theory, that's possible. You add a few billion robots, you massively increase the output and the productivity of that output. Okay. Here's the growth rate. So you're driving down regrettable expenditures by double digits per year. And the double-digit increase in good spending happens too at the same time.
Right.
Okay. And here's what happens to GDP. Nominal GDP goes from 30 trillion to 113 trillion. But because of deflation, real GDP is 500 trillion.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
30 to 500.
Right.
Right. So again, amazing abundance. You have that kind of economic engine, that kind of output.
Right.
That's pretty much all the goods and services anybody in the United States could want.
Then there becomes the issue. There becomes the issue, which nobody seems to be addressing, and maybe you're going to address it with your other analysis, is all that you want. I mean, there's the famous old saying about, what do you get grandma for Christmas? She's got everything she could possibly need and or want. And I run into this problem every single season with my wife in particular. It's like you just buy it when you want it. So what's left over? And my thought would be, will there be enough creativity and or will people be interested enough in the possibilities of what we could have? I have a 1,700 square foot house. We've downsized. Would I want, if I had enormous wealth, would I want a 3,500 square foot house today at my age with just two people? And the joke is we have three bedrooms, we never go into the third one ever.
Yeah.
So if I had 27 bedrooms, what would I do with all those rooms? So I've been playing with this in my mind for a very long time, is where is that point at which you actually get into a decline in spending because there's nothing left that you want.
Yeah. Well, don't underestimate the human capacity to want more,
I'm with you.
right?
Yep.
That said, if you think about back in the day when we had to gather water,
Yes. Right.
right, and how much time and effort it took to gather water,
Yeah.
now you don't have to give it a second thought. It comes out of the tap
Right.
or a bottle,
Right.
right? And it's cheap.
Right.
So that's what we're going to have with many, many other goods and
Oh yeah.
services.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Okay. But I've moved on from wanting water. I still probably, if I was gathering water, I'd probably consume the same amount of water then as I would now drinking water out of a tap.
Uh-huh.
Right. So my demand for water hasn't increased. It's allowed me to move on from that and focus on something else that I want and spend time on and effort to get.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to see that sort of roll through the economy. The cost of food will become negligible. The cost of
Right.
shelter will become
Right.
super cheap.
Right.
All those things will start to fall away in terms of cost, and
Mm-hmm.
humans then will strive for something else.
Right.
To your point, the Taylor Swift concert tickets
Right. Right.
to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's always going to be scarcity in something,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but for most of what we need as humans to survive and live comfortably and happily, it'll be dirt cheap. It'll be plentiful,
Yeah,
right?
of course, I have speculated that travel and experience, which are kind of related,
Yeah,
will be the big businesses.
yeah.
You'll need a bunch of people to do the help with the travel and with the experiences that you'll want humans rather than robots to do. And there's other categories as well, but yeah, it's so imagine a time when you have really, really good submarines, so people can start exploring. People that are curious can start exploring the oceans way more than we do today. So, I mean, there are places left to explore. Elon talked a lot about, outer space exploration. There are going to be places left to explore, but that kind of experience and or travel because of curiosity and because of filling up our days with something interesting. I think that's where we're headed.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Um, it was interesting, by the way, just back to this example, here's 60% GDP growth in 1 year here
Yeah,
on a
yeah,
real basis,
yeah.
right? Not too far off a triple digit number that Elon mentioned.
Right, right.
And again, these are just scenario numbers on a spreadsheet. I mean, just totally fake scenario. But what I'm trying to show is if AI and robotics can deliver as promised or as hoped by many,
Hmm.
that this actually becomes possible.
Right,
As crazy as it seems today when we're used to 2% GDP,
right.
right? Uh, Interesting. It's a hard thing to wrap our minds around. I'm starting that journey to try to figure this out
Yeah.
or try to understand it.
So
Yeah.
as you do that, one of the other things to take into consideration is the lowest among us. So whether that's people in equatorial Africa or whether that's people in the inner cities who for whatever reason don't prosper at this point. Maybe they could prosper and they're just too lazy to do it. But taking all that aside, um, that's the real in my view, that's the huge potential. We've already moved people in the United States basically out of the kind of poverty where you can't figure out where your next meal is going to come from. That's very hard to do in America today. You have to work at it, not to get your three squares.
Yeah.
But in a few, and that was not true, 150 years ago. So in a truly new world, will those folks that are now at the bottom of the structure in the United States, will they look like upper middle class? They will have 1,700 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, even if there's only two people. They will be um, how do we say it? We live better than the kings did
Yeah.
150 years ago. Well,
Yeah.
will people at the bottom half of the scale live like kings in another 10 years?
Well, I think the answer is an unequivocal yes.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, I mean, in our economic system, certainly there's always people that sort of just get, bad luck and
Right.
things happen to them that, there's going to be distribution of that, right? And there's other people at the other end that just seem to be incredibly lucky and everything goes perfectly right and they,
Right. Right.
right, and they end up with, hundreds of millions of dollars for
Right.
no really good work on their own. Um, so there's always the end of the distributions, but overall that distribution, the middle part of the distribution is going to move up,
Yeah.
right? For sure. And that also, I believe, apply to the rest of the world.
Right.
However, with the rest of the world, if you're in a country where your leader is stealing from its people,
Right.
right, then no, that becomes pretty difficult. So everybody needs to be in an economic system where there's at least enough ability to, prosper without somebody stealing it from you.
Right.
And that's not true in many places of the world. Not true in
Mhm.
North Korea, not true, wasn't true in Venezuela. Hopefully it is going forward, a number of other countries.
Right.
Yep. So anyway, so that's the initial discussion on that. There's a lot more we can talk about here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I'm increasingly sort of starting to see that how this might be possible in terms of a rapid acceleration in GDP growth, particularly
Yeah.
real GDP,
Yeah.
which is what matters.
Hmm.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Completely changing the topic.
Okay.
Let's see what Phil Bicel has to say.
Okay.
Um, referring to NVIDIA's presentation, right, about their autonomous vehicle software and effort.
Sure.
And Phil said in his post, it didn't change the autonomy landscape, it merely confirmed it, right?
Yep.
What was shown was a platform, not a product, set of tools for partners still attempting to solve problems Tesla is already confronting in the real world, right? And then Elon commented on this, and he says roughly 10 billion miles of training data is needed to achieve safe, unsupervised self-driving. Reality has a super long tail of complexity.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we've all heard him before say that he thought that we needed 6 billion miles,
Hmm. Hmm.
right, before regulators would approve
Hmm. Hmm.
unsupervised, right? And it was 6 billion miles because he was thinking in terms of kilometers. He's like, well, 10 billion kilometers. And he likes to think in orders of magnitude. And we saw this in the Peter Diamandis interview as well. He says, well, I didn't think it was a billion kilometers and 100 billion seemed too much. So 10 billion is a good number.
Right.
And falling out of that 6 billion miles. Now, in this post, he says 10 billion miles,
Hmm.
16 billion kilometers.
Right.
But in my mind, the difference between 6 billion miles and 10 billion miles is, it's a rounding error in the whole scheme of
Right.
things,
Right.
right? He's not saying 100 billion miles. He's still in the same range.
Right.
Okay. So right now, Randy, we are at, according to Tesla, and they have this tracker on their website, they're at essentially 7.2 billion miles right now. Miles driven.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is not simulated miles. It's
Right.
miles driven from the fleet.
Right.
And Elon in that post says about 10. So based on where we are now and the $10 billion target, if that indeed is something that's important, when do you think Tesla will get there, Andy?
I want to say a year from now.
No.
No,
July 23rd, 2026.
this year, just
Yeah.
5 months away, 6 months
Yeah.
away. Okay.
We're on track for that. Now, that assumes a linear increase in the same rate that we've been increasing now.
Yep. Yep.
No acceleration.
Right.
I do believe there could be an acceleration because FSD usage is going to increase. I now drive 99% of my miles on FSD.
Right.
Right? It's that good. I don't feel the need to drive anymore.
Mhm.
They're selling more Teslas all the time, right?
Yep. Yep.
Call it 400,000 a quarter. And FSD adoption rates, I think, will climb.
Yes.
So this line should be a curve sloping upwards. So in reality, it could be sometime in June.
Hmm.
Um, so that's not far away at all. Basically, we're in this zone where Elon refers to safe, unsupervised self-driving. We're in that zone. We're if that's the singularity event for FSD, we're in it now.
Right.
We're in that range.
Mhm.
Just because we might hit the 10 billion in July or June, doesn't matter. We're in that zone,
Sure.
right? Um, so I thought that was kind of interesting. Here's the chart a little bit closer. We are also at 2.6 billion city miles driven.
Mm.
Okay. And if we extend that out, that by the end of the year will be over 4.5 billion,
Mm.
close to 5 billion city miles, close to doubling between now and the end of the year. Okay. Again, a linear growth,
Sure.
no expansion. I think this curve should slope up a little bit.
Hmm.
Remains to be seen how much. But I wanted to give you a specific date. We can
Yeah.
revisit this
Yeah.
on July 23rd and see
Yeah,
exactly
right.
where we're at.
Right.
I think it'll be this date, if not again sooner.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the latest date for 10
Got it.
billion.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah. And if we're not close, I'll get out there myself and drive more miles just to
There
bump
you
up.
go. That'll help. That'll help. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Combustion cars, Randy, have already peaked in the world and will never recover, according to
Mhm.
Jan of EV Wire.
Mhm.
This is a nice chart that shows combustion vehicles here. It looks like 2017 peaked maybe at about 80 million. And now they're down just to, what's this, 50 some million, 55 million maybe.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
But we do have an expansion in hybrid electric and plug-in
Yep.
hybrids.
Mhm.
And then you can see the EV is starting to look material here now. That's a positive thing.
That is. It's yeah, moving in the right direction. Maybe a little slower than we thought it would, but it is definitely moving in the right direction.
Well, and here's something that's not going to help. Gas prices have dropped to their lowest level in 5 years.
Not going to help.
Pretty cheap, it looks like, in the middle of the country.
Yes.
A little bit more expensive on the West Coast
Yes.
and Alaska and Hawaii. And so on. And then so national average at 281 a gallon right now. And then according to this post, sources in Texas are seeing prices below $2 a gallon. This is showing $1.88.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I saw a post that was at Costco, $1.77.
yeah. Now, it seems to be good news for the Venezuelan stock market, up 50% in one day. Talk about a value opportunity, I suppose.
Right.
So that's good.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, not to forget this, but we now have a Tesla semi-charging station coming soon in Texas.
Okay.
8 chargers at the Fuel City truck stop.
Hmm.
It's directly off US Highway 30, about 10 miles east of Dallas.
Wow.
And it looks like they're going to be, I'm not sure how this works. It looks like they're pulled through, but then they've got the chargers back here. I'm not sure. The trucks have to back in?
Wow.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Not quite sure how to read that, but it looks like the equipment's back here. Here's the charger here. I don't know. We'll have to see how they set this up.
Right. Right.
And then, by the way, there's now
Long hoses.
long hoses. Yeah, well, that makes it very expensive and heavy. Tesla now has 80 semi positions open at the Giga Nevada semi factory.
Yeah.
And I'd imagine that will increase as they start to, produce.
Yeah. Exciting year on so many levels. On so many levels. All right. Well, CERN, you've definitely taken us down the path of futurism here. An appropriate week to do that. A different angle than I think anybody else has done in terms of reflecting on what took place on Tuesday with the moonshot broadcast. And I can't help but just end it, by saying we cover this in the book. And according to the reviews, according to anybody that I can find that has any understanding of this area, we cover it differently and better in terms of actual things like we just talked about, in terms of outcomes, in terms of how it may impact daily life, how it may impact your personal situation with your job or with what you do with your free time, as well as the dynamics of the actual industry as it goes through these issues with energy supply, chip supply, data centers in space, all the rest. Believe it or not, That book was published over 3 months ago now, and Brian Wang in there is talking about data centers in space. So, the book is ahead of its time, covers everything it needs to do to really give you a grounding in what's happening in this AI space. And CERN says,
I wish there was a way to download the book into everybody's brain.
right,
Right. That's the challenge is taking the time to read these days. It seems to be a challenging endeavor for humans just to find time to read.
right.
We need a Neuralink, Randy. We all need Neuralinks, and then we can just download the book into our brains.
Yeah, just a little thing in the back of our neck, and you just plug in.
Well, that would be okay, but it's going to be a Neuralink that's wired right into your brain. That's going to be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The day may be coming. We'll see. We'll see how quickly.
Maybe,
All
maybe
right.
that's the first thing that Optimus does when it arrives at your doorstep. It also does some surgery on you, so that you can just mind meld with Optimus. You don't
That's
actually have
right.
to talk to it.
Yeah, it sounds great to me.
It's a 2-for-1 special with Tesla and Neuralink.
Amazing. All right, then. Oh, I just sounded like Peter Diamandis, who says amazing like 100 times a show. All right, CERN. Again, always tremendously valuable and useful and entertaining as well. Thank you for coming on today. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.
Thanks, Randy.